I was explaining to viewers there, as you heard, the framework and the context around this backstop proposal. And there are lots of suggestions, you'd be more aware than anyone else, that the Prime Minister might be looking at limiting this backstop arrangement to Northern Ireland with some rather big consequences. Are you picking up any signals from Number 10 that that is what he's intending to do?
Well, what the government is intending to do is to replace the backstop with alternative arrangements. You see, the backstop's an insurance policy. It's not the main game in town, if you like. The main game in town, of course, will be the future relationship between the UK and the EU and whether we can get a free trade agreement with the EU in the future. But as we leave the EU, the Irish government were concerned that there should be arrangements, transitional arrangements in place to avoid a hard border. And we want to avoid a hard border. We don't want to see a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Our agri-food sector, for example, does a lot of trade across the border. So we're looking at practical ways to address that, alternatives to the backstop that we hope the EU, including the Irish government, can agree to. And crucially, not only would that avoid a hard border on the island of Ireland, but as you pointed out, we don't want a trade border in the Irish Sea either. We don't want tariffs being imposed on goods being sold from Northern Ireland into Great Britain.
So when people talk about the possibility of a Northern Ireland only backstop, and that is the phrase used, you're saying that you're not really in the position to say that the Prime Minister is considering that. Is that your understanding?
That is correct. What the Prime Minister is considering is alternative arrangements to the backstop. So to replace the backstop with new arrangements. So this won't be a question of a UK backstop or a Northern Ireland only backstop. It will be replacing the backstop with new arrangements that recognise the circumstances of Northern Ireland having a land border with the Irish Republic, trading across that border on a daily basis, but don't separate us from Great Britain, which is, of course, still by far our biggest market.
You had talks with the Prime Minister in Downing Street, I think last night, yes? Are you convinced that he does want a deal?
Yes, we are absolutely convinced the Prime Minister wants a deal. And it's not just the DUP who think that. The Irish Prime Minister met with the Prime Minister on Monday and afterwards recognised that the UK government is serious about getting a deal. And I think the language we're now getting from Dublin, from the Taoiseach, and also from other leading politicians in Dublin is, I think, more positive about finding alternative arrangements and their willingness to consider an alternative to the backstop.
But ultimately, Jeffrey, if Northern Ireland emerges from this with a framework where it's treated differently in some way to other parts of the UK, that's not something that you're going to be able to digest.
Well, it depends on what those differences are. If they are practical arrangements, for example, to deal with issues like animal health, and we already have arrangements in place across the border for that, or indeed looking at the issue of standards between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Yes, we'll look at practical arrangements. Well, what we will not do and what the UK government will not do is to create a border within the United Kingdom. I think it would be unprecedented to have a situation where you have a customs border or a tariffs between one part of the United Kingdom and another part of the United Kingdom. And incidentally, that would contravene the principles of the Good Friday Agreement. We believe it would undermine that agreement and the political institutions that go with it. Consent is very important in all of this. And if we're to find an accommodation, it has to be one that both sides in Northern Ireland can sign up to, including Unionists, and that the Irish government and the UK government can sign up to as well. That's what we're working towards, and we believe that our government and the Prime Minister is serious about it.